It's the last episode of Lincoln to Local for the 2025 Oklahoma legislative session, and we'll be visiting with Oklahoma Farm Bureau's Gage Milliman about all the action that Oklahoma Farm Bureau saw during the 2025 legislative session, including 3 Farm Bureau priority bills that will become law. Gage, the 2025 Oklahoma legislative session ended on time on May 30th when the legislature sine died, but I know this is our first chance to really catch up with the bills that Oklahoma Farm Bureau saw passed just due to some kind of procedural things that the state of Oklahoma provides for after a session's done. Can you kind of give us an update of how session ended, kind of what that process was like for you guys in public policy as y'all rounded out the 2025 portion of the session?
Yeah, it's good to be here to wrap things up, even though it is a few weeks later, just because we had to wait for some things to wrap up even after they sine died. But they did make that deadline like they're supposed to on May 30th. It was an interesting last 24 to 48 hours. They went into that looking at some possible veto overrides. The governor had actually vetoed 68 bills, and the legislature felt like they could maybe override 10 of those and had some conversations with the governor, and we're hoping to maybe get 7 or 8 of those overrode. But some comments were made by the governor that he wasn't real happy with some of those bills they chose to try to override, and they turned it into anything they thought they had votes for, they were going to run it. And they stayed till after midnight, both the House and the Senate, and ended up overriding 47 of those vetoes. So it was an interesting process. The Senate stayed, like I say, they both stayed till after midnight. The Senate sine died that night, early morning on that Friday morning, where the House chose to come back at 9 o'clock the next day and wrap up a few things and officially adjourn at that time. So the way those things worked, not only did the governor veto those 68 bills, he also allowed 305 bills to go into law without his signature, which basically he had made a comment that said if he didn't feel like it really moved Oklahoma forward, it didn't need his signature. So he didn't keep it from going into law, but he didn't support it. So the legislative session just ended a little bit differently with the governor not signing some of those bills, allowing them to go into law without his signature, and of course the legislature overriding some of those vetoes. But when they ended, there were some bills that were still out there that the governor had not signed, and then also some of those that they did not get those overrides. So that's what drug that process out another couple weeks to see what happened to those bills that were still hanging out there in limbo.
Now, Farm Bureau, thankfully, we saw 3 of our priority bills that will be becoming law when the appropriate time reaches, and one of the big ones was one that deals with how municipalities or cities can annex property that our Farm Bureau members, being rural Oklahomans, when a city comes knocking on their door, I know sometimes that has some implications for our rural residents. Can you kind of share what that House bill is and what it does?
Yeah, I think that was one of our real big wins this year with House Bill 1166, and it was authored by Representative Kelly and Senator Howard. And what it does is just clarifies that municipalities cannot annex land without getting the permission of the majority of the landowners that are going to be annexed. And we ran into some issues with that bill, kind of rolled along early without really through the House without much opposition, and then got into the Senate and kind of ran into some problems. Some senators had a few issues with some different things that did with the annexation, and then also a part of it in there that would require them to provide services, and if they did not provide those services in 10 years, they would be automatically de-annexed. And some senators had some issues with that, thinking there may be some investment in those areas, and then it turned around. They don't get to keep that land annexed. So we started working with senators on that. It was one of those bills that ultimately did end up in a conference committee, which means that there was no amendment that was accepted from the Senate was not accepted by the House. Ended up in conference committee, and it was one of those bills that came out of conference committee, was voted on and passed by both chambers, but was not signed by the governor by sine die. And at that point, before that, those bills had so many days. If the governor didn't sign them, they automatically went into law. This case, it changes. They have so many days. If the governor doesn't sign them, then they're automatically vetoed. So we sent some letters to the governor, and a few of our members called and asked for him to sign that. And luckily, we were happy he did sign that annexation bill into law.
Now, another two bills that were signed into law that were Farm Bureau priority bills, that will be becoming law, had to deal with energy and specifically eminent domain for the purposes of installing energy facilities of various sorts. Can you kind of share what those two bills were and kind of those separate areas of energy production that they dealt with?
Yeah, House Bill 2756 by Representative Caldwell and Senator Green dealt with transmission facilities, requiring them to get a certificate of authority through the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, and also specifies that any eminent domain authority resides with the state. So pulling some of that authority back from the federal government to the state. And it was our one bill that we got through what I would call the normal process, where it went through all the committees, both chambers, didn't have any amendments that had to be followed up on, and it went to the governor's desk in that time before they adjourned. And that is one he did not sign, but it went into law without his signature. Another bill we've talked a whole bunch about is House Bill 2752 also by Representative Caldwell and Senator Gallagher. And it's one that just claims that the private renewable energy facilities like those solar farms and battery storage facilities, that they cannot use eminent domain to obtain those leases. That was one that had an amendment on it, made it through the House, had an amendment in the Senate. Didn't have time to get that all done. It ended up in conference committee. We were able to work it through conference committee, got it out. It was passed by the Senate and the House. And once again, they adjourned before the governor could sign it. But the governor did sign that one last week, and we are very thankful for him taking care of that one for us.
Now, I know there was one more priority bill we talked throughout legislative session and Lincoln to local that didn't make it through the whole process this year, but knowing how the Oklahoma legislature works, it's not necessarily the end of that bill. If you can kind of share what that bill was and where it's at.
That's right. So, we are in the first session of the 60th legislative session. We completed the first session, so next year will be the second session. So any of these bills that were not voted down and killed this session will be able to pick up right where they left off this year. They can start there next year. And that's where we're at with House Bill 2155 by Representative Dobrinsky. And it's one that would require permitting for those renewable energy facilities. And it made it through some of the process, but got held up and actually ended up in conference committee like our other bills did, but it did not come out of conference committee. So it is not dead. It can come up next year, and we continue to plan to work on it next year.
Now, I know there's been 4 priority bills we followed all the way through session. We've wrapped up here today, but I know in public policy, you guys track more than 400 bills this session. So there's a lot of things that have implications for rural Oklahoma and agriculture, and we don't have time to go through all of those bills, obviously, but what are some of those highlights of other bills that were not our priority bills, but that our members are very interested in and Farm Bureau's been keeping tabs on through this session?
Yeah. Well, like you said, there's over 3,000 bills filed this year, like most years, and we go through and we select those bills that might be of interest to our members, and some of them never see the light of day, and some of them come out of nowhere. Some of those bills do change as session goes on and look different than they did when we started. And as you mentioned, we started with over 400 that we were kind of keeping eyes on. So the amount that they actually put into law is pretty impressive for what they did. But some of those bills of interest we had, one we've talked about a lot is House Bill 1126, dealing with manufactured protein. And it's just a labeling bill that would require manufacturers to label that protein as whatever it is. It just can't say meat on there. And that was something that was definitely a priority of our rural members and our cattle producers for sure, just making sure that that bill made it through, and it did, and it was signed by the governor. Along with some of those other renewable bills that we were working on, there was one House Bill 1373 that just puts in a solar field decommissioning act that would require those companies to be bonded in a way that if that solar field ever goes out of commission, they would be required to clean that up and restore it back to the way it was, and whether it's grassland or whatever it might be, so it can be put back into use. And also along those lines, there was one Senate Bill 713 dealing with wind energy light mitigation. And what it does is it requires any wind turbine facility put up after January 1st, 2026, to put on this light mitigation technology, that the lights won't be flashing all night long. They'll just come on when an aircraft is in the area. So pretty neat technology that they have, and a bill that got put through that was put into law, was not signed by the governor, but did get through there without his signature. So a lot of things happening in renewable energies this year, and those were just some of those bills that did. Also, a big issue that we had was the supporting funding for the OSU Vet Med College, and House Bill 2773 solidified that, claiming $250 million for the new vet facility. Obviously one that we definitely supported, and we're happy that the governor let that one go through, did not sign it into law, but allowed those funds to be allocated for that building of the new vet center.
Now, so much going on at legislative session. I know this is maybe the Farm Bureau calendar time where we all take a step back and breathe just a moment, but the public policy season for Farm Bureau never really ends, and we're getting ready to go into our policy development season. Can you kind of just share with what our Farm Bureau members are going to be doing in this legislative off-season, but definitely our policy high season for Farm Bureau as we develop the next round of grassroots policies that your team's going to be taking to the Capitol in 2026?
All right. There's so many things that we worked on, and there's times that bills would come up and our members would call, and we would dig through our policy book and find that we don't have clear policy or any policy on some of those bills. So while it's fresh on our mind, is a good time for our members to be thinking about those resolutions they want to submit. We're going to have our August area meetings coming up in the month of August, so just a couple months away from that. And then our county boards will be meeting, and our county committees in September and early October, and they'll be going through those resolutions that they have submitted. They'll get those submitted here to the home office, and then we'll meet in October with our resolutions committee and get those resolutions put in order and finalized for convention in November. So seems like November is a long ways away, but there's such a process between now and then to make sure that we get that policy put in place to make us as effective as we can be going into next session next February.
Well, thanks, Gage, for all the updates all legislative session long, and I know we'll be talking next year as we get fired up again for the 26th legislative session. So thanks for your time, and we'll be keeping our members in tune and in touch as we go through our policy development season.